She stepped into the cafe, shaking off the rain that had soaked her from head to toe, clutching Ethan tightly against her chest. His small body trembled under the thin jacket she had hurriedly thrown on him. The bus had broken down in the storm, leaving them stranded, soaked, and desperate for warmth. The umbrella had snapped in her hands, leaving them completely exposed, and now every drop of rain dripping from her hair and clothes made her feel more fragile, more worn than she had ever felt in her life. Before she could even scan the room for a table, she instinctively noted the patron's stares. A few eyebrows raised, a couple of murmurs barely audible. She hated the judgment in their eyes. The kind that came from seeing someone who looked like they were barely scraping by, someone who did not belong in a place like this. She ignored them, focusing only on Ethan, who was burrowing his little face into her shoulder, muttering against the cold, "Mommy, warm, please." Elena forced a smile, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "I know, baby. We'll be warm soon. Just a little longer." Her heart ached, not only from seeing him shiver, but from the memory of the past 3 years. 3 years since she had left a life that had been suffocating, terrifying, and dangerous. 3 years since she had walked away from Kang Ji-hoon, the man who had once held all of her world in his hands, and the father of her son. She had fled with nothing but hope and determination, clinging to the belief that she could build a safe life for Ethan, free from the shadow of his father's empire. The barista, a young man with a gentle smile, approached. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked, his voice kind but cautious. Elena nodded, giving a small laugh she didn't feel. "Hot chocolate for the little one, please," she said, lowering her voice. "And just a coffee for me." She counted the money in her purse, careful to make every coin stretch, and handed it over with a tight-lipped smile. Every choice was about Ethan, every decision measured to keep them safe, warm, and unseen. As she stepped toward a corner table, Ethan tugging at her hand, Elena felt it before she could see it, the shift in the room. A subtle tension that prickled her skin, a ripple that made the warmth of the cafe seem suddenly thin and fragile. She froze, glancing toward the entrance, and her stomach dropped. There he was, Kang Ji-hoon. Time seemed to slow. The rain clinging to the windows outside blurred the edges of his figure, but she knew him without needing to look too closely. He hadn't changed much, still tall, still impeccably dressed, still carrying the air of danger that had made her heart pound with fear and desire at the same time. His dark eyes scanned the room, sharp, calculating, and then they landed on her. Her pulse quickened. Every instinct she had spent the last 3 years honing screamed at her to turn, to run, to disappear, but she couldn't. Not with Ethan pressed against her chest, not with the world so public and crowded. Before she could act, Ji-hoon moved, and the entire cafe seemed to respond to his presence. Patrons shifted uneasily in their seats, whispers followed him as he passed, and his entourage of silent, muscular men flanking him like shadows made her chest tighten. Her son squirmed in her arms, sensing the tension and looking up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Mommy, he's scary," he whispered. Elena swallowed, forcing her voice to remain calm. "No, baby, he's just someone from the past. Nothing to worry about." But even as she said it, she knew the lie would not hold. Ji-hoon's gaze remained fixed on her as he approached. He exuded control, power, and danger in a way that no ordinary man could. Elena's hands gripped Ethan's shoulders instinctively, a protective wall around him. She had hoped the years had dulled whatever hold he had over her, but it was as sharp as ever. Her body reacted first, a mix of fear and something older, deeper. And Ethan, blissfully unaware of the history he carried in his blood, clung to her as if he could feel it too. Before the man could reach them, Elena's inner voice, the one that had carried her through sleepless nights and constant worry for 3 years, whispered, "Don't let him see your fear." She squared her shoulders, lifted Ethan just enough so he could see her determination, and forced her voice to be steady. "Ji-hoon," she said, just loud enough for him to hear, her tone measured, controlled. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of panic. She wouldn't. Not here. Not now. He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth just twitching, a predator acknowledging the presence of prey that had dared to escape him. Elena, he said, voice low, silk over steel. 3 years, and you still think you can hide from me? He stopped a few feet away, giving his men a subtle gesture to halt. I see you've done well, keeping the boy warm. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second when they lingered on Ethan, then hardened again as they met hers. The tension in the cafe was almost unbearable, but Elena maintained her composure. She forced herself to breathe evenly, whispering to Ethan, "Stay close to me, baby. Don't be afraid." He nestled closer, whispering, "I like the hot chocolate, mommy." Her lips pressed together to keep the mix of fear, anger, and something else, something she couldn't name, from escaping. Ji-hoon took a careful step closer. "He's mine," he said simply, his eyes never leaving Ethan. Elena stiffened. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't shouted, hadn't made a scene. Yet in that single statement, the weight of everything she had done, every sleepless night, every move to keep them safe, came crashing down. Her life, her freedom, her son, everything, was suddenly under the shadow of a man she had spent 3 years trying to forget. Before she could respond, a thought struck her. Before I tell you how she ended up here, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe. And if you've ever had to face someone from your past you thought you escaped, you know exactly how terrifying this moment feels. She hoped the message reached beyond the walls of the cafe, where fear and memory collided with reality. Elena's gaze hardened, meeting Ji-hoon's directly. "He's only 3, she said quietly, her voice strong despite the tremor she felt inside. "He doesn't know this world, and I won't let him." Ji-hoon's storm gray eyes held a storm of their own, unreadable, powerful, dangerous. And in that instant, Elena realized that no amount of distance, no amount of careful planning over the past 3 years, could have prepared her for this confrontation. She had fled, she had survived, but now the past had come to claim her. Elena's fingers tightened around Ethan's small hands as she slowly backed toward a corner of the cafe, trying to keep him hidden from Ji-hoon's full view. She could feel the eyes of every patron in the room, some curious, others wary, and she hated every second of it. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear, but Ethan's safety was the only thing that mattered. She had promised herself he would never know the fear she felt for herself, and she intended to keep that promise. Ji-hoon didn't rush. He moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, each motion perfectly controlled. His men flanked him silently, shadows that mirrored his calm menace. The smell of his cologne reached her, expensive and commanding, and a shiver ran down her spine. It was a smell she hadn't forgotten, one that had haunted her dreams during the long nights after she had fled. She remembered how intoxicating and terrifying he had been, all at once. "Elena," Ji-hoon said again, softer this time, but no less powerful. "It's been 3 years. You've hidden him well." He gestured subtly to Ethan. "But hiding from me won't work forever. He's mine, and you know it." His voice held no anger, only cold certainty, like a steel trap snapping shut around her chest. Elena swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "You're wrong," she said, her voice trembling slightly but steady. "He's mine. I'm his mother, and I protect him. You can't take that from him." She tried to sound confident, but inside her heart pounded like a drum. Every step he took toward her made her feel as if the world was shrinking, as if every decision she had made for the past 3 years had led her to this single, terrifying moment. Ji-hoon stopped a few feet from them, leaning just slightly, his eyes softening as they flickered over Ethan's small form. For the first time, Elena saw something else in him, something beyond the power and danger. A shadow of longing, a crack in the otherwise impenetrable armor he wore so carefully. Ethan looked up at Ji-hoon with wide eyes, his small fingers curling around Elena's sweater. "Mommy, he looks scary," he whispered, voice barely audible. Elena's heart ached. She whispered to him, "It's okay, Ethan. He's just someone from the past. Nothing to worry about." But even as she said it, she knew the lie wouldn't hold. Ji-hoon's eyes softened further when they landed on Ethan, and in that brief moment, she could see the conflict inside him, the recognition, the hunger, the shock. He had never known this little boy, had never held him, had never felt the weight of his own child in his arms. "I didn't know," Ji-hoon said finally, voice low and quiet, almost to himself. I didn't know you had him." The words weren't an apology, not really, but they carried the weight of something he hadn't allowed himself to admit for 3 long years. Elena's chest tightened. He had been searching for her, she knew that, but he hadn't found them, hadn't reached Ethan until now. Her thoughts raced. How had he found them so quickly, so efficiently? 3 years of hiding, and yet here he was, walking into her life like a shadow she couldn't escape. Elena pressed a finger to Ethan's lips, signaling him to be quiet, even as Ji-hoon's gaze lingered on them both. The tension in the air was electric, a charge that made every breath feel heavy and every movement a potential trigger. Ji-hoon tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You've made him safe," he said slowly. "I can see that. But this life, this freedom you've carved out, it's temporary." His voice was calm, but every word carried an unspoken threat. Elena's jaw tightened. She had fought so hard to create a life for Ethan where they weren't shadows of someone else's empire, and now that life was dangling in front of her like a fragile thread. Ethan squirmed in her arms, looking from her to Ji-hoon with innocent curiosity. "Mommy, is he nice?" he asked, the words small and hesitant. Elena smiled faintly, brushing a strand of wet hair from his forehead. "He's complicated, baby. Just watch and stay close to me." Her own voice sounded hollow to her ears, but she had to keep her composure. Every instinct screamed that one wrong move could spiral into chaos. Ji-hoon knelt slightly, his hands resting on his knees, lowering himself just enough to meet Ethan's gaze. "Hello, Ethan," he said gently, his voice carrying a softness Elena hadn't expected. Ethan blinked, unsure, but there was something magnetic about the man's presence. Elena felt the smallest flicker of relief at the momentary gentleness, and then she reminded herself that it was fleeting. Ji-hoon was a man who commanded empires built on fear, and that gentleness was a carefully measured tool. Elena straightened, holding Ethan tightly. "We need to go," she said, trying to mask the panic in her voice. You can't stay here." Ji-hoon rose smoothly, straightening, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "We'll go when I say," he replied simply. The words weren't loud, but the authority behind them made her knees feel weak. Before she could respond, she realized something crucial. This was not just a reunion, not just a confrontation, it was a test. Ji-hoon wanted to see how much she had changed, how far she would go to protect Ethan, and how strong she had become in his absence. Elena's chest tightened at the realization. She had survived 3 years alone, against every challenge, and now she faced the ultimate trial. Her mind raced, and she knew she had to act, even as the storm of fear and adrenaline coursed through her. She lowered her voice, speaking almost to herself, hoping to channel her inner strength for Ethan's sake. "I won't let him take you, Ethan. I promised you a life without this, without him controlling us. I'm not breaking that promise." Ji-hoon's eyes softened fractionally, but his posture didn't waver. "I never wanted to control you, Elena," he said quietly, almost pleading. "I wanted to protect you. You don't understand the world you live in. The threats, the dangers, all of it could have touched him." His words, though calm, carried a weight that made Elena's stomach knot. She knew him too well. He wasn't exaggerating. This life was dangerous, and Ethan's innocence made him a target she could never have fully prepared for. A pause hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The cafe seemed to shrink around them, the murmurs fading into silence as every eye turned toward the tense tableau. Elena's fingers clenched around Ethan, and she whispered softly, "Stay close to me, baby. Don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'm here." Then, as if compelled by an unspoken instinct, Ji-hoon stepped just a little closer, lowering his voice so that only Elena could hear. "We'll leave. But you need to trust me, even if you hate me for it. He's my son, too, and I won't let anything hurt him." Elena's heart thumped wildly. The words were simple, Yet the implication was enormous. 3 years of independence, of hiding, of struggling to create a normal life for her child, all of it was colliding with a reality she had never imagined, that her past, and the man she had tried to forget, was now inseparable from Ethan's present and future. At that moment, she realized that this was more than a reunion. It was the beginning of a dangerous, complicated new chapter. And no matter how she felt, she had to make a choice for Ethan, for herself, and for the life she wanted him to have. Before we continue, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone from your past show up when you least expected it, drop a comment and let us know how you handled it. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss a second. Ji-hoon's hand gestured toward the door, a silent command, and Elena felt the full weight of his presence behind her. She knew this ride, this confrontation, was only the first step into a world she had tried so hard to escape. But now, with Ethan safe against her chest and Ji-hoon watching every move, there was no turning back. Elena followed Ji-hoon out of the cafe, Ethan tucked securely in her arms. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but her coat was still damp and clinging, her hair plastered to her forehead. Every instinct told her to run, to vanish into the crowd, but she knew it was useless. Ji-hoon's presence was magnetic, suffocating, and undeniable. His men flanked them silently, forming an invisible cage around them as they walked. Ethan murmured against her chest, "Mommy, why is he following us?" Elena forced a calm smile, brushing a strand of wet hair from his eyes. "He's just someone from before, baby. Someone you'll get to know. Don't be scared." Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears, but she couldn't let her fear show. Not now. The SUV waiting outside was sleek and black, immaculate in its design. Ji-hoon opened the rear door with a subtle gesture, motioning for her and Ethan to enter first. Elena hesitated, her mind racing. This was the man who had once held her life in his hands, the man whose empire had terrified her, whose control she had spent 3 years escaping. And now she was about to step into his world, a world of luxury, power, and danger, all while holding her son. Ji-hoon's voice broke the silence, calm but commanding. "It's safe. Sit." Elena moved carefully, lowering Ethan onto the plush seat before taking her own place across from him. The interior smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne, a reminder of the wealth and influence Ji-hoon wielded effortlessly. Ethan looked around with wide eyes, taking in the dark, glossy surfaces and subtle gleam of the polished metal accents. "Is this yours?" Ethan asked, pointing to the tinted windows and the sleek design. Elena smiled faintly, trying to ease his curiosity. "Yes, baby, it's his car. We're just going for a ride. Don't worry, Mommy's right here." Ji-hoon's gaze lingered on Ethan, softening for a moment, but the control in his posture never wavered. As the SUV glided through the streets of Seoul, Elena's mind raced. 3 years of freedom, 3 years of small victories and careful hiding, and now she was trapped in a gilded cage. She didn't speak, focusing instead on Ethan, who was fascinated by the passing lights and the unfamiliar sights outside the tinted windows. Ji-hoon's presence filled the space, silent but oppressive, as if the very air inside the car acknowledged his authority. Finally, Ji-hoon spoke, voice low and even. "You've done well, Elena. He's healthy, happy, protected. But you know this life, your freedom, is temporary." Elena's hands tightened on Ethan's small shoulders. "I don't care about your life," she said firmly. "I care about my son. You'll never take that from me." Ji-hoon's lips twitched into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I never said I wanted to take him. I said he's mine. There's a difference." His words weren't loud, but they carried weight, a reminder of the power imbalance between them. Elena knew he meant it. Ethan was his blood, his heir, and no matter how much she had struggled to shield him, she could never erase that fact. Ethan shifted in her lap, looking from her to Ji-hoon. "Mommy, is he nice?" She forced a laugh, brushing his hair from his eyes. "He's complicated, baby. Just watch and stay close to me. She could feel the boy's small fingers curling around her sweater, clinging for reassurance. Ji-hoon's hand rested lightly on the divider between the front and back seats, his gaze never leaving them. I want him to be safe. I want him to know me. You can protect him from the world, but not from me. He's my son, and I will not allow anything to harm him. Elena's chest tightened at the words, the combination of authority and tenderness making her stomach twist. The ride to his penthouse was quiet, punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the occasional shuffle of Ji-hoon's men. Elena felt a growing unease as they approached, her mind imagining every scenario, guards everywhere, Ethan exposed, her old life erased completely. She had planned so many things, imagined so many contingencies, and yet none of it mattered now. Her son was at the center of a storm she could not control. Finally, the car pulled into a private garage. The space was enormous, sleek, and impeccably maintained, a hidden fortress beneath the city. Ji-hoon stepped out first, his posture straight, commanding and unyielding. Elena followed, Ethan still pressed to her chest, every step feeling heavier than the last. The elevator ride up was silent, and when the doors opened, the view took her breath away. The city sprawled beneath them, glittering and vast, a world of power and influence that Ji-hoon commanded with effortless authority. Ethan's eyes widened. Wow, so many lights. Elena smiled faintly, trying to focus on his awe rather than the anxiety twisting her gut. Ji-hoon gestured toward the living space, and she stepped inside, immediately noticing the luxurious furnishings, the subtle gleam of polished wood and marble, the careful attention to detail. Every surface screamed wealth, power, and meticulous control. Ji-hoon's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. This is where we'll stay for now. It's safe. And I promise, I will protect him. Elena's hands tightened around Ethan, her mind racing with doubt and fear. Could she trust him? Could she accept that her son's life was now intertwined with the man who had once held such terrifying control over her? Ethan's gaze wandered to a large dollhouse in the corner, exquisitely detailed, a stark contrast to the danger and tension that filled the room. Ji-hoon knelt slightly, gesturing toward it. Go on, he said gently. Play. Ethan's small face lit up, and for the first time since the cafe, Elena allowed herself a faint sense of relief. He was safe, at least for now. Before we continue, if you're watching this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone from your past show up unexpectedly, drop a comment and let us know. You won't believe what happens next in this story. Elena sat down on the couch, holding Ethan as he explored the dollhouse under Ji-hoon's watchful eye. The tension between them was palpable, a fragile balance of power, fear, and something unspoken. Ji-hoon's presence was overwhelming, but for the first time, Elena glimpsed a softer side, a man who loved his son fiercely despite the dangerous world he inhabited. Yet beneath the softness was still control. She could feel it in the way he moved, in the way he watched, in the subtle instructions to his men. Every gesture reminded her that her freedom, the life she had fought to create, was now suspended. She had a choice: fight and risk everything, or navigate this new reality to protect Ethan. Elena exhaled slowly, holding Ethan tightly. She had survived 3 years alone, but now she faced a world of wealth, danger, and influence that could swallow them whole. She knew that every step forward would require careful calculation, courage, and, perhaps, an unexpected trust in a man she had once escaped. The penthouse felt both awe-inspiring and suffocating to Elena. The floor-to-ceiling windows displayed a view of soul glittering beneath them, but instead of wonder, she felt a tight knot of anxiety in her chest. She held Ethan close, feeling his warmth against her body, and reminded herself that he was her priority. This world of wealth, power, and hidden danger was foreign to them, and yet they had no choice but to navigate it carefully. Ji-hoon watched them closely, every movement measured, every glance calculated. He gestured for his men to stand back, leaving a carefully drawn space between himself and Elena. You'll stay here tonight, he said simply. Safe. warm. And tomorrow we'll talk. His tone left no room for argument, and Elena felt the weight of his control pressing down on her, though his gaze softened ever so slightly when it lingered on Ethan. Ethan, oblivious to the tension, toddled toward the dollhouse with curiosity and fascination. He marveled at the tiny furniture, the miniature people, and the detailed rooms, completely absorbed in this new environment. Elena smiled faintly, grateful for the brief distraction, but the moment of calm was fragile. Every second that passed reminded her that Ji-hoon was here, and that meant her carefully constructed life of 3 years was suddenly vulnerable. "I don't know why you're here," Elena said, her voice low but steady, trying to assert some control over the conversation. "You left us. You disappeared. And now you expect, what? That we just hand everything over to you?" Her eyes locked on Ji-hoon, searching for a hint of the man she had once loved, but all she saw was power, authority, and a dangerous calm. Ji-hoon's storm-gray eyes met hers, and for a brief second, there was something unguarded in his expression. "I didn't leave," he said quietly. "I couldn't find you. I searched every lead, every contact. And now that I have, I won't let anything happen to him." His hand motioned toward Ethan, who was busy arranging tiny chairs in the dollhouse. "He's my son. You can't change that, Elena. And I won't allow harm to come to him, no matter how far you've tried to run." Elena's fingers clenched around Ethan's small hands. "I've protected him for 3 years," she said sharply. "I've done everything I could to keep him safe from you, from your world. And I'll continue to protect him." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, a mix of fear, defiance, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Ji-hoon stepped closer, his posture relaxed but commanding. "This isn't about control," he said, voice low and measured. "It's about protection. The world I live in, it's dangerous. The people who would harm him don't care about our past. They only care about weakness. And right now, you've given them 3 years of opportunity." His words weren't cruel, but they carried the weight of undeniable truth. Ethan looked up from the dollhouse, sensing the tension and shifting uncomfortably. Elena knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "It's okay, Ethan," she whispered. "Everything's okay. Just stay with me." She hoped her calm voice would shield him from the storm brewing between the adults. Ji-hoon's expression softened as he observed her protectiveness. "You're a strong woman, Elena," he said, almost admiringly. "Stronger than I remembered. That's why he's alive, why he's safe. But strength alone won't keep him from danger. That's why I'm here." Elena swallowed hard, the conflict in her chest intensifying. She wanted to hate him, to push him away, but the sight of Ethan, so innocent and unaware of the true danger surrounding him, made her hesitate. For a moment, silence settled over the room. The only sound was Ethan's small hands moving furniture and the faint hum of the city below. Elena's mind raced, weighing her options, calculating the delicate balance between keeping her son safe and maintaining any semblance of autonomy in this new world. Then Ji-hoon spoke again, softer this time. "We need to establish rules," he said. "Boundaries. He's my son, and you're his mother. But we must work together. He must be safe, and that means trust. Trust that I will protect him, even if it means making hard decisions." Elena's pulse quickened. The thought of giving even partial control to Ji-hoon made her stomach twist. "Trust," she repeated, her voice skeptical. "After everything, you expect me to just trust you? I've spent 3 years surviving without you, and now you walk back into our lives and demand trust." Ji-hoon's eyes were steady, unyielding. "I know I have no right to demand it," he admitted. "But I will earn it. I will prove that I am here for him, for you, in a way that matters. You can fight me, resist me, but he is mine as much as he is yours." His words were firm, but beneath them was an undercurrent of sincerity Elena hadn't expected. Ethan tugged at her sleeve, his small voice asking, "Mommy, is he my daddy?" Elena felt her chest tighten at the question. She forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "Yes, baby, he is. And he wants to take care of you. But you stay close to me, okay?" Ethan nodded, turning back to the dollhouse, and Elena exhaled, feeling a fragile sense of relief. Ji-hoon's eyes softened as he watched them interact. I won't force anything, he said quietly. But I will be present. He will know me. That's non-negotiable. Elena nodded, her mind racing. She could see the edge of compromise forming, a possibility of working together for Ethan's sake, but every instinct screamed that this alliance would not be easy. Before continuing, here's a quick reminder. If you're watching this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone from your past show up unexpectedly, share your experience in the comments. You won't believe what happens next. Elena rose, holding Ethan close. We'll follow your rules, for now, she said cautiously. But I need to know that he's safe and that nothing in this world will hurt him. That is my only priority. Ji-hoon inclined his head, acknowledging the terms. Agreed, he said simply. But you'll have to let me handle the threats that come for him. That's my responsibility. Elena's jaw tightened. She didn't like it, she didn't trust it, but deep down she knew she had no choice. This world, Ji-hoon's world, was far more dangerous than anything she had faced alone. And Ethan's life, his safety, was worth any compromise. The tension in the room remained, a delicate balance between fear, defiance, and the faint beginnings of understanding. For the first time, Elena realized that surviving 3 years alone had been preparation, not for freedom, but for the challenges of navigating this new reality. And the journey ahead, for both her and Ethan, would test every ounce of her strength, courage, and resilience. The penthouse was vast, almost overwhelming, yet meticulously organized, a reflection of Ji-hoon's precision and power. Elena held Ethan close, letting his tiny hand curl around hers as they stepped further inside. The boy's wide eyes darted from the polished floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows, and then to the massive dollhouse in the corner. For a moment, Elena allowed herself a faint smile. Despite the tension and fear, Ethan's innocence was a reminder of why she had fought so hard for these 3 years. A soft voice called from behind a door slightly ajar. Good evening, Mr. Ji-hoon. Elena turned to see a poised woman stepping forward, neatly dressed in the kind of professional attire that immediately suggested authority over domestic matters. And welcome, Ms. Elena. I'm Maria, the household manager. I'll make sure Ethan is comfortable and attended to. Her eyes flicked to the boy, warm but measured. Elena nodded, appreciating the efficiency and care Maria exuded. Ethan immediately brightened at the prospect of attention. Hi. I like dolls, he said, tugging on Elena's hand. Maria smiled and gestured toward the dollhouse. Then you'll have plenty to explore. Come, I'll show you where everything is. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. Ethan would be cared for, at least in this moment, and she could focus on the conversation that loomed with Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon watched quietly as Maria led Ethan to a corner of the room and began setting up playthings. The storm-gray intensity in his eyes softened slightly when he glanced at Elena. He's adapting quickly, he said quietly. That's a good sign. Elena's jaw tightened. She wanted to trust him, but she knew better. Trust was earned, not given. I need to understand the rules, Elena said, her voice steady but sharp. How will this work? How will Ethan be protected, and how will you allow me to maintain some autonomy? Her gaze searched for him, seeking even a flicker of compromise. Ji-hoon moved closer, lowering his voice. Autonomy? You'll have it in terms of parenting decisions and daily routines. But the world outside this apartment, the threats, the people who would harm him, that's my domain. I will not let anything reach him. That is my promise and my responsibility. Elena nodded slowly. She could see the logic, but the suffocating control lingered like a shadow over her chest. Ethan looked up from the dollhouse. Daddy, you play with me? The word daddy hit Elena with a sharp pang, a mixture of pain, disbelief, and reluctant hope. Ji-hoon's eyes softened instantly. Of course, Ethan, he said gently, moving closer to kneel at the boy's level. He lifted a tiny figurine from the dollhouse. And I'll help you build this castle, okay? Ethan's face lit up. Yes, he shouted, clapping his hands with excitement. Elena watched, a complex mix of emotions swirling inside her. Jihoon was dangerous, unpredictable, and unyielding, yet she saw the tenderness in his actions. Her son's laughter, light and unrestrained, made her chest ache. Could a man so terrifying truly be capable of love? Could she believe in this fragile beginning of a relationship that involved both her son and the man who had once dominated her life? The sound of the city below was a constant hum, a reminder of the world outside that neither Elena nor Ethan fully understood yet. Jihoon's protective presence was palpable, a silent shield that promised security even if it carried suffocating control. He leaned back slightly, observing the boy carefully. "He's yours, Elena," he said quietly, almost reverently. "And he is mine. But together, we can ensure he thrives." Elena's hands clenched lightly around Ethan's shoulders. "We'll see," she replied, cautious, but open to the possibility. "For now, I'm focused on keeping him safe and happy. That's all that matters." Jihoon nodded, accepting the statement without argument, recognizing the boundaries she set even as he asserted his own. Hours passed with quiet attention. Ethan explored the penthouse with Maria's guidance, and Elena navigated the strange mixture of relief and fear in her chest. Jihoon's presence was constant, his eyes vigilant, and his actions measured. She could see the layers of control, protection, and care interwoven in every gesture he made. Yet every moment reminded her of the power imbalance she had to accept for Ethan's sake. Finally, Jihoon spoke, breaking the silence. "There are threats," he said softly, almost as if sharing a burden. "People who would harm him if they knew he existed. We must act before anything reaches him. Security will be increased, and we'll need to remain vigilant at all times." Elena's heart tightened. She had known his world was dangerous, but hearing it confirmed made the stakes painfully real. Ethan looked up, sensing the tension. "Mommy, it okay?" Elena pulled him close, smoothing his hair. "Yes, baby, it's okay. Daddy's here to protect us." Jihoon's gaze lingered on the boy, a mix of resolve and affection. He crouched slightly, so he was at eye level with Ethan. "I'll protect you, Ethan," he said gently. "No one will hurt you." Elena swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the past 3 years pressing down on her. She had fought to protect her son, and now she faced the reality that protection came with complicated compromises, uneasy alliances, and the constant presence of a man she could neither fully trust nor entirely resist. Before we continue, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone from your past show up unexpectedly, let us know in the comments. You won't believe what happens next in this story. The night settled over the penthouse. Ethan slept in his new room under Maria's careful supervision. Elena sat in the living room, feeling the luxurious emptiness of the space press against her. Jihoon approached, sitting across from her with measured calm. "I know this is hard," he said quietly. 3 years of freedom, 3 years of survival, and now I am here. I don't expect it to be easy." Elena nodded slowly. "I've survived without you for 3 years. I've made a life for him and for myself. And now I have to navigate this world with you present. It's complicated." Jihoon's eyes softened, his rare vulnerability showing through the armor of authority. "I don't intend to make it simple," he said quietly. "But I will ensure he is safe. That is my responsibility, Elena. You can fight me, resent me, mistrust me, but his safety is non-negotiable." Elena exhaled slowly, realizing that this fragile balance of trust, control, and love was the only path forward. She had no choice but to accept the delicate dance they were beginning. And for Ethan, she would endure whatever challenges lay ahead, navigating the complex, dangerous world that Jihoon commanded. Elena followed Jihoon through the long, silent hallway to his office, the polished floors reflecting the faint city lights outside. Ethan stayed with Maria for the evening, tucked safely in his room, and Elena felt a mix of relief and unease. Leaving her son behind, even for a short while, brought a tightening in her chest. Every step toward Jihoon's office reminded her that she was entering a domain she had once fled, a world of danger, wealth, and power that was completely foreign to her. Ji-hoon opened the door and gestured for her to enter. The office was expansive, sleek, and minimalist, dark wood, leather, and glass dominating the space. It smelled faintly of cigars and expensive cologne, a subtle reminder of the empire that Ji-hoon controlled. He motioned for her to sit across from his large desk, and she did so cautiously, hands gripping the armrests of the chair as if it could anchor her in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I know this isn't easy," Ji-hoon began, voice low and calm. 3 years. You've built a life without me. And now I am here." His eyes didn't waver, but Elena could see the tension beneath his measured calm. He wasn't used to negotiating, to explaining himself, and yet he attempted it now. "I've survived without you for 3 years," Elena replied sharply, voice steady, but laced with anger and exhaustion. "I've protected Ethan, kept him safe, kept him from the world you control. And now you expect me to just hand him over?" Her words trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the raw emotion she had bottled up for years. Ji-hoon leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. "I don't want to take him from you," he said carefully. "He's mine as much as he is yours. And I want him to know me, to grow up knowing his father is here, even if it's complicated. You've done well protecting him, but the world isn't kind, Elena. It never has been, and it never will be. He needs both of us." Elena's fingers clenched on the chair. "Both of us? Do you realize what this means? That he'll grow up in fear, surrounded by threats, violence, and people who answer only to you. You're a crime lord, Ji-hoon. How do you think that affects a child?" Ji-hoon's storm gray eyes darkened for a moment, the weight of his world pressing into the room. "I am aware," he admitted quietly. "Every threat, every shadow in this city, I deal with it. And I will protect him from it. I will ensure his life is as normal as possible, given the circumstances. But you cannot protect him from everything, Elena. You tried, and it's time to accept that we can do better together." Elena shook her head, frustration and fear colliding. "Better together? You don't get it. I've had 3 years to teach him safety, independence, and love without fear. And now you show up, asserting control, demanding trust, and pretending that everything will be fine." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. "I'm not pretending. I am offering protection. And I am asking for trust, not blind trust, but a chance to prove that I can be the father he deserves." His eyes softened slightly, a crack in the armor he had maintained for years. "Ethan is our responsibility. Not mine alone. Not yours alone. But ours." Elena felt the sting of tears behind her eyes. She had spent 3 years alone, struggling, surviving, and protecting Ethan from the shadows of his father's empire. And now, she had to confront the reality that her son's life, and her own, was intertwined with the man who had once ruled her world with fear. I can't just hand him over," she whispered. "I won't." Ji-hoon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I'm not asking you to hand him over," he said softly. "I am asking you to accept my presence, my protection, my involvement. He's my son, Elena. I cannot and will not allow harm to come to him. I need you to understand that. I don't want to fight you. I want to work with you." Elena's mind raced. Could she trust him? Could she believe in this fragile, tentative truce, knowing the dangers that lurked outside these walls? She exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. "We'll see," she said cautiously. "But I'm watching every move you make. Any harm, real or potential, comes to him, and I will hold you accountable." Ji-hoon nodded, accepting the terms with a solemn grace. "Agreed," he said. "I expect nothing less. But understand this, we cannot be passive. Threats exist, enemies exist, and I will deal with them. You've done well, but there are things you cannot see, things that are too dangerous to confront alone." Elena's fingers tightened into fists. "I understand that now," she admitted. "But my son's life isn't just about survival. It's about love, safety, and the ability to grow up without fear dominating every moment. You'll have to prove to me that you can provide that, Ji-hoon." His lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Then I will prove it. Not with words, but with actions." The tension in the room shifted slightly, a fragile balance forming between fear, respect, and the faint beginnings of understanding. Elena exhaled, leaning back in the chair. The conversation had been exhausting, raw, and necessary. It marked the first step in navigating this complicated new reality, a world where safety, love, and danger coexisted in fragile balance. She knew there would be conflicts, challenges, and moments of fear, but she also knew that for Ethan's sake, she had to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it became. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. You won't want to miss what happens next. Ji-hoon stood, walking toward the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city. "We start tomorrow," he said quietly. "We establish routines, security, and protection measures. You'll see actions speak louder than words. He will be safe and he will know me. That's my promise." Elena nodded, her mind racing with the implications. She had spent 3 years building a life on her terms, and now that life was intersecting with a man who commanded empires, power, and fear. But she knew deep down that this fragile alliance was necessary not just for her survival, but for Ethan's. The tension in the office remained, a mix of authority, fear, and the faint beginnings of trust. Elena realized that navigating this world, Ji-hoon's world, would test her in ways she had never imagined. And yet, for the first time, she allowed herself a flicker of hope that perhaps, despite the danger, this complicated alliance could work for her son, for herself, and maybe, in some distant possibility, for something like family. The next morning, Elena woke to the soft sound of the city beneath the penthouse. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the polished floors, and for a brief moment, she felt disoriented. This wasn't the small apartment she had struggled to maintain, or the modest cafe where she had fought to keep herself and Ethan safe. This was Ji-hoon's world, luxurious, controlled, and full of unspoken rules. She found Ethan sitting at a small breakfast table in the corner of the living room, carefully arranging his toy figurines. Maria moved quietly behind him, setting out a healthy breakfast. The boy looked up and smiled, his eyes bright. "Mommy, breakfast." Elena approached, ruffling his hair gently. "Morning, baby. Did you sleep well?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "Yes. Daddy said we can build more castles today." Elena felt her chest tighten. Ji-hoon's presence lingered in the background, a silent shadow of authority and care. The contrast of danger and tenderness was jarring, yet somehow necessary for Ethan's sense of security. Ji-hoon entered the room quietly, standing near the windows. He offered a small smile, watching Ethan with a protective gaze that both reassured and intimidated Elena. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope he slept well." "He did," Elena replied cautiously. "But we need to talk about the rules, Ji-hoon. This isn't just about him, it's about me too. I need to know what's safe, what's expected, and what boundaries exist." Her voice carried the weight of 3 years spent alone, defending her son from every possible threat. Ji-hoon nodded, moving closer to the breakfast table. "Agreed. Safety is non-negotiable. Boundaries will be respected. I will handle the threats, you handle parenting. We will communicate. That's the foundation. Everything else, we build from there." Ethan clapped his small hands together. "Can we play after breakfast?" Elena smiled faintly. "Yes, baby, we can play. But let's eat first." Ji-hoon crouched beside the boy, helping him with his cereal, his movements careful and gentle. Watching the two interact, Elena felt a mix of apprehension and something she hadn't expected, relief. The boy was happy, safe in this moment, and Ji-hoon was capable of tenderness despite his reputation. As the day progressed, Elena and Ji-hoon established routines. Security measures were quietly implemented, camera systems, guards stationed discreetly, and protocols for emergencies. Every action reminded Elena of the weight of Ji-hoon's world, yet also of the protection it offered. She began to see the balance, danger outside, safety inside, and her son at the center of it all. Later, Ji-hoon led Elena to a private room in the penthouse, a study filled with screens, files, and subtle reminders of the empire he controlled. "Here," he said, motioning for her to sit. "This is where I monitor threats, handle business, and ensure he is safe. I want you to see, understand, and trust the measures I'm taking." Elena surveyed the room, overwhelmed by the technology and organization. It was a stark contrast to her years of struggle, yet it represented control and protection. "It's a lot," she admitted. "But I can see why it's necessary." Ji-hoon nodded. "It's not just about power," he said quietly. "It's about survival. For him. For you. For us." His eyes softened, a rare vulnerability showing through. Elena felt a flicker of hope that, perhaps, their combined strengths could create something stable and safe for Ethan. In the following weeks, the trio adjusted to their new reality. Ethan flourished under the dual presence of his mother and father, his laughter filling the penthouse as he explored, learned, and played. Elena navigated the delicate balance of trusting Ji-hoon's protection while asserting her role as his mother. Every decision, every interaction, was a careful dance between freedom and control. Despite the stability, tension lingered. Threats still existed outside the penthouse walls, subtle but persistent, a reminder that their safety was never guaranteed. Ji-hoon's protective measures intensified, from discreet guards to heightened surveillance. Elena accepted it, understanding that this was the price of living in his world, yet she couldn't ignore the shadow it cast over their lives. One evening, after Ethan had been tucked into bed by Maria, Elena sat in the living room, Ji-hoon joining her quietly. The city lights outside twinkled like distant stars, beautiful and dangerous. "It's not easy," Elena admitted softly. "To navigate this world, to trust you, to let him live here knowing the danger exists. I've spent 3 years protecting him alone, and now I have to share that responsibility with someone I barely know." Ji-hoon reached out, placing a hand gently over hers. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I don't expect it to be easy. But we both want the same thing, his safety, his happiness. We'll learn together. We'll protect him together. And maybe, in time, we can even trust each other fully." Elena felt a warmth in her chest, a flicker of possibility that had been absent since the chaos of their reunion. "Maybe," she whispered. "For him, we have to try." Ji-hoon's lips curved into a faint smile. "We will," he said firmly. "We'll face the world together, for him. And we'll show him that love, safety, and family can exist, even in the midst of danger." As the night settled over the penthouse, the sounds of the city below fading into quiet, Elena allowed herself a moment of reflection. 3 years of struggle, fear, and independence had brought them here, to this complex, dangerous, and fragile family. She held on to the hope that, despite the shadows, they could forge a life of protection, love, and growth. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to navigate danger for the sake of your child, share your story. You won't believe what happens next in this saga. Elena glanced toward Ethan's room, the faint light casting a soft glow through the doorway. The boy was asleep, dreaming perhaps of castles, adventures, and a world filled with love and safety. She knew the road ahead would be full of challenges, compromises, and constant vigilance, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a new beginning, a life where her son could thrive, where love and protection could coexist, and where their fractured family could slowly heal in the shadow of Ji-hoon's power. The night was quiet, but it was a beginning. A beginning of trust, compromise, and the fragile hope that, even in a world dominated by danger and control, a family could survive, grow, and find moments of joy. Elena knew the journey was just beginning, but for Ethan, she would face it all.